Yo, what is going on, everybody? Crumbs Blunt here, doing another crummy breakdown on a Monday, even though it's Tuesday, because I'm crummy. So this one, I'll admit, crummy breakdowns automatically cause me a lot of anxiety. I don't know if you guys know that, because I'm always terrified that there's two spectrums. I want to point out to a customer what it is that they might be getting, and on the other side, I'm always really terrified that an artist might misunderstand or mistake what I'm saying. But the reality is that if I've done a breakdown for it, or you see that piece on the wall, I love that piece. I have respect for that piece. The issue is that everybody's tastes and what they're willing to pick or decide as a flaw or choose as a flaw kind of varies. And also sometimes the reason for grabbing a piece. So the reality is that I'm kind of weird, and I'm okay with kind of sharing some of the win. So I'll admit, like, I'm okay with telling an artist if I love that artist's work and I've bought some of their work before, I want the worst one. I've definitely requested a mold eater from somebody before because I've wanted that. I don't, you know, but at the end of the day, we have to do a lie detector test sometimes and be very, very honest, brutally honest sometimes about what the pieces are. And the reality is that if I needed a canoe built, that yes, somebody might be able to make a really beautiful canoe, but if I need it to go down a stream, there's going to be people who build that canoe to be better, unfortunately, to do that, and with less leaks. And I'm kind of going to have to look at the toys kind of in that same spectrum. Now, obviously, again, intent comes into play, but I do believe that for the most part we could all agree that most don't set out from day one to make a piece that will be loaded with bubbles, to have a piece that will have a lot of flashing, to have a piece that will have very evident registration marks, sanding, dremeling, rotary tool, you know, Dremel being the name brand. So I get it. There's a lot of things that come into play. I do believe that to a certain line there is the red herring. Part of the issue is, and I've pointed this out in the past, there's bound to be animosity at some point. It's great for everybody to want to create and just have a great time, and I'm a firm believer in shine theory. If you see my unboxings, then you know that I'm actually a firm believer in shine theory. Those are a very subjective unboxing. When an unboxing, in my opinion, doesn't go in a way that paints the artist in the best light or might mislead a consumer, and I've tried to discuss that issue with the artist and it goes sour, I don't share those. The reality is, these particular toys even, I didn't know that they were in the condition they were. And I'll pull up the photographs there so you see what I saw. I was embarrassed. I would never spend this on these figures ever again. Dollar Slice even told me when I kind of tried to tell him the condition of the figures without telling him the artist, you know, like, don't bring that stuff up. Often would tell me, don't bring that stuff up into the scene. And it is a little hard sometimes not to think that that might have been to keep the bar low. It certainly benefits an artist who's creating in the scene to say, hey, don't maybe point out a certain standard. And then I got pulled from all sides, right? So somebody recently told me I've got a chip on my shoulder, and then I need to move that so I can swing a little harder. But the issue is that chip is formed because I have consumers coming to me, and some of them are other makers, and they're very hurt and embarrassed by the purchases they get, and I don't know what the heck they want me to do for them. And I've got some artists that have this whole mindset of, not my toy, not my problem. So they don't really give a shit about the quality standards of the scene. And meanwhile, you've got other artists that actually have the nerve to tell me I need to be buying the good pieces. And I don't really know what a good piece is. Because even some of those artists that have a very high standard, I see flaws in their pieces. And therefore, I'm kind of curious, like, hey, if you guys are sitting there on your high horse telling everybody what the work should look like, maybe then you should be able to hit certain bars yourself. You know, the whole glass house throwing stones type deal. So again, I'm going to get into this breakdown. I'm going to put all my feelings and thoughts aside. I'd like to point out again, though, that, you know, if I had known this is what I was getting, maybe the condition of some of these pieces would have sat a little better with me. But unfortunately, I definitely felt a little misled. These are all 3.75 figures. The two unpackaged ones were $50 Canadian a piece, and the other piece there was 88 Canadian. So I'm going to put on some gloves, and we're going to get right on into it. Now, the reason I chose these pieces, because I feel like there's going to be people out there that almost kind of think, like, I'll admit, I'm fully aware that I'm probably going to be burned at the stake for this one. Yep. That's kind of how she goes, right? Everybody has something that's bothered them or hurt them, and I often get in the DMs. Don't get me wrong, like, my back is well supported in the DMs, but I'm well aware that I might be friggin' burned at the stake for this one. So, hence why my hands are so sweaty while I'm getting this glove on. I don't even know why I'm gloving. I guess to show respect to the pieces. because, you know, that's another thing I find kind of strange. Everybody understands that Crumbs loves these pieces, has respect for the artist, has all good juju, but the moment that I approach the DMs and I'm actually kind of like, hey, I'm not even sure what to do about this, but I feel like I've got to kind of point this out, because there's others out there that must be noticing this too, and you're told, lower your standards, or if you want to buy cheap pieces with no concept, that's up to you. Or, yeah, that stuff gets me a little bit triggered when I'm told I have to lower my standards. I haven't bought a factory toy in a year. So the entire time that I've been buying indie toys, I haven't bought a factory toy. I haven't gone online on eBay and bought a factory toy. I had one purchase of Z-Bots from Wildflower Addicts, and that's it. Indie toys. It's been all indie toys I've been touching. So, gotta keep that kind of in mind here. I'm going to be comparing a couple different things. I'm still going to break down the figures in the way we wanted, but I'm going to kind of show off those things that suddenly become surprises that we're not maybe really expecting, and you know, maybe kind of shed some light, because the reality is my spending habits have cut way down. There was 2 people in town here that were interested in figures that no longer really interested in the scene, and some people are kind of like, whatever, doesn't matter. I guess I'm of a different mindset. I love the toy scene, I love the toy community. It kind of bothers me when people that I brought into the scene hoping that they could have as much joy and love for it as I did suddenly feel they've been taken advantage of, or underappreciated, or just like fed upon. Hurts my feelings a lot. So let's dive into the breakdown here. The first one I'm going to show off is actually going to be an Admiral Akbar. So the Admiral Akbar here, of course I'll pull up the pictures. Everything's going to be plugging in tons of pictures in here. So this guy here, I'll admit, I originally pulled out the Admiral Akbar. I noticed in the packaging, it was, I'm going to zoom in on that, I want to get that tacky, nice, awesome pull away. There we go. I originally had thought that potentially this had some leftover black in the mold, and I was originally going to pick this figure to show off, kind of like, hey, like, if you don't mind, guys, like, clean your molds out, you know? But then I realized it wasn't from the mold. It was the fact that the Admiral Akbar is actually missing all of their fingers. There's absolutely zero grip in there. So what Mr. Marcello has decided to do was put like this lovely black sticky tar-like tack on the handle of the gun, and then wedged it where it's missing a thumb and all the fingers. And then when you see in the photo there, angled it in such a beautiful way that there was no way. Now keep in mind, the lovely part about this is Crumbs was brand new to the scene. I had brought very few pieces. Toy Qigong, who was calling me brother all the time, recommended this guy highly, so go over to Mark Healis, oh, friend and brother, and sending you pictures, and oh. So suddenly you've got a package that's sitting there while you're waiting for the Roman to come out, and you're all excited, and then it all shows up months later. The proof is in the pudding now, folks. I am not strong. Oh, it's in Tupperware, man! The Tromer nailed it. Mark Healis, like... oh, no. I'm going to show it off a little bit there. We got a little bit of an angle on the magnet there, Mark. I'm just going to be... I'm going to put it out there, Mark Healis. And unfortunately, that for me is going to be a little bit of like a little bit of a fart for me. Alrighty, cool. Thanks so much, guys. We opened up some toys. Woo! Have a great night. And you're going to notice right on the arm there, I was mentioning it, careful. So you can see this artist just was like digging around, trying to find that sweet spot in there, hacking away. The other thing I'm really tired of hearing, sorry, I'm just going to be honest, I'm really tired of hearing that magnets are poor for playability. The reality is you need to be upping your magnets if that's what you're looking to do. You need neo-lithium magnets. So, see Admiral Akbar here? See how I try to lift him? Nope, can't. Oh, he might. Check this. I get frustrated with poor magnets, and as somebody who's bought the magnets, I don't like being told what expenses have to be put into the item for magnets. I've purchased magnets. Cool. So that's a big thing for me. I'm not a huge fan of that. We've also talked about the bubbles before. Now the bubble on the foot, you're gonna see in the picture, I definitely would have seen that bubble on the foot. I can't complain about that. Wouldn't have known half the heel was missing on the back. So that was a bit of a bummer. The one thing that I find often happens, if you watch one of the Rainbow Yawn videos, you'll see that when they did the Bob Moss figure, they had to meticulously draw out a tracing for the arm. Oh, there goes the gun. draw out a tracing for the arm and the shoulder, so that way every time the magnets are the same. There's really no reason, unless you're rushing or you don't care, for the arms to not line up. But if you want a nice polished piece out there, in my opinion, that's the time that you do take. So, what can you do? That was the Admiral Akbar for 50. And again, you might have noticed, I probably haven't bought a 3.75 figure in a very, 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 very long time. The other one, this one I'm going to have to zoom in a lot on. This, again, kind of broke my heart. So I'm going to break down how this one was made just a little bit. So with the Gamorrean Guard, this one would have actually been casted as a solid figure. So a lot of times when artists have like a vintage figure, they don't want to do like a boil pop, they're not sure how to take the limbs out. Definitely what happened here, get it. We can actually see, and I'll photograph it, that the hand would have been casted like into the leg. So that's definitely there. Other evidence that shows that it was casted as one solid piece and cut off. On both the arms, we have like an identical triangular shave mark, and we can assume that that's like definitely where that guy got cut, from where it had sat in a single cut mold. And it's the exact same on the other arm. So this would have been casted as one solid piece. Now if we look at what we know are the registration lines, we'll actually see the original registration of the figure and the mold. And we'll also see where they've cut with their jeweler's cut in order to actually get around the leg up into the hand. And I'm going to focus right in on that cut right there by the hand. Because where all of these lines become important is the other day in Crumbs' old stories, they posted about using elastic bands versus using packing tape. And even lovely Neil Ewing pointed out, go up one even further and use a wall. Build a mold box. So, reality is that you've got Kerfloss, who's putting extreme detail into their mold. You've got Neostalgia out there, busting out some intense extreme molds. You've got Most Monsters putting out some beautiful molds. And you make a recommendation of using packing tape, and everyone says, do what I want. And that's cool. That's totally cool. I get it. That's totally cool. Everybody do what you want. I don't mind. And at the end of the day, like, yes, like, I don't have to buy it if I don't want to buy it. I understand that. But this is what happens. See how this is like bumping out like this? See how there's not an even surface tension all the way around? And of course, we have no way of putting registrations in this if it's cut mold. So, all of a sudden, you've got all this happening, and now my mold is sitting like that. Why? Because of course, resin expands. It's curing. It is an exothermal reaction, and it's expanding. And depending on which resin you're using and casting with, it's going to expand at different temperatures and expand differently depending on which color it is. Black expands actually more rapidly and gets bigger. It's black. It conducts heat more. So this is what happened on that figure with the mold. This figure actually has bits of the mold in it. This is a mold eater. Now I've told you, if I love an artist's work and I know that I'm purposely buying a mold eater because I want that significance as a collector, fantastic. When you see the photo there, you'll understand that there is no way Crumbs understood he was getting a mold eater. We've talked about bubbles. In the last breakdown that I did do, I talked about the undercuts and how a lot of times the undercuts are probably the most difficult spot, right? Well, of course, that is going to be loaded with bubbles. And of course, if you're familiar with the original Gamorrean Guard figure, it's going to have bubbles all over the bottom. Now the issue is you go on eBay right now and you can actually grab one of like probably a much better for $12.99. So keep that in mind. I'm gonna go over the hands because this, in my opinion, is actually where we can tell like this thing was cut. It's got bubbles, and they clearly tried to shave away some of the excess from where the mold had actually been split. We've got a nice hole on this side. We can tell that when they were trying to shave the blade across here, it actually ended up causing the blade to slip and take shavings off from under the arm. We've got bits of the mold all underneath there. Of course, we're going to have bubbles all in between the legs and bits of flashing that was there. Same issue with the magnets as on the last one. Weak, off-center. This I wish I could show that I could hold this guy up, but if I do, he's going to fall. And I guess what kind of bothers me about that, Homer Simpson, Toxic Streams Toys, there's no way this guy weighs any less than the Gamorrean Guard. So, not really sure what the excuse is there. So again, both those 3.75s were $50, and I understand that maybe I'm cheap, and you're all kind of like, bah, Crumbs deal. That hurt me to get those. So now we're hopping into Roman, Robot Monster. So of course I've seen a couple of you have been getting your Romans. Right off the hop, could have taken a quick second and just cleaned that up on the blister. It's a handmade blister. I'm gonna go into it. Anybody who's using this stuff here, just stop. Unless you want the figures to fall off and break on the floor when you're basically requesting that people hang them, just stop. It doesn't. Please. So the other thing I'm going to point out, I'll take a picture of it. When they did make the blister, they sunk him a little bit too deep. And where that becomes an issue, there's no way for it to actually display nicely in the blister without it obscuring all the details and features. Now where the pricing I feel gets a little bit obscured as well, is that when you have somebody who's doing trades all the time, and they get a piece, and that piece is priced at $40 or $50, and they're looking at the quality of that trade, and they then go, well, if this is what $45, $50 would normally go for in their store, I should surely be able to charge X amount. And then they almost forget for a second, but wait a second, I'm using pounds, or euros, not USD, or CAD, and so all of a sudden, 50 euros is a lot different, or 50 pounds is a lot different than 50 CAD. So, we've got this lovely Roman figure here for 88 Canadian, almost $90. First thing I'm going to point out is on the head. It's a rounded sculpt. I'm surprised, given that it's got the flat base here, that we've got these very crude chiseled marks on the back of the head. What also is incredibly surprising to me is given that we know this Gamorrean body is basically a modified version of this. So essentially had one of these left, cut the head off of it, put a bunch of monster clay on the body, casted it up as a new figure, made some great use of a somehow probably worse off character than this. So chops the head off, makes this sculpt, casts this, but has to super glue it on, but didn't paint it before super gluing it. So all of a sudden, all the edge work doesn't actually meet down with the character. And on top of that, there's all these empty gaps that I'll make sure to photograph that go right on through underneath this headband. And I have no idea, I'll be honest, I have no idea why this little thing on the back. That's probably going to bug me forever. I don't understand how that couldn't have been shaved down more. Okay, now both this fella and the Gamorrean Guard, they were poured into the feet. This one here most likely had an actual base. This one here would have been actually poured directly into the feet. The reason why we know it was directly poured into the feet is we've got those little tiny punks. That's what I'm going to call them. They're the peg holes for putting on a stand. Whereas this fella here does not have them. So at some point, somebody told Marquilas, hey, you should put it up on like little blocks or a little stand, and that'll help you. So they did that. Now, they still went the same route, I believe, though, where they kept the hands on the sculpt when they put it into a cut mold. And the reason I'll say that is because if we look at the arms, nearly like 50% of the arm is just not there. It's completely exposed, and it looks as though they've just continuously tried to sand it away with like a Dremel. So they're not even using like a nice sandpaper or anything like that, just a Dremel, just going to town on it. The hands are basically not even there. And again, $88 piece. I personally didn't feel good about this. And I think that's where sometimes I get very offended when people say buy the good pieces. I've spent the good money on pieces, and I've been very hurt, and I have a very hard time now spending money on any pieces. This drives me to the moon and back. I understand how a drill bit works. I do. I promise you, I do. I understand that a drill bit will be angled at the bottom of the hole. I assure you, I know this. But what bothers me is resin is very, very soft, and there are like a billion different flathead screwdriver bits. And if you actually just went back into your holes afterwards for a millisecond even, and gave it a little zap, that flathead screwdriver will flatten the base where you're gluing the magnet. So having the magnets all sitting on weird 45-degree angles, that does actually kind of bother me, especially when you're dealing with like a 2mm variant. Also, while we're on the topic of screwdriver bits, I need to focus on this for a second. Screwdriver bits, if we look at the measurements on them, are you using a conversion chart when you're purchasing magnets that might be 5 to 4mm? Because if you're boring a hole and that hole is actually wider than the magnet, then filling that space with a bunch of super glue isn't the solution. And rubbing a bunch of super glue over top of the area isn't the perfect solution. That is a thing. That's a thing. If you pick a magnet that is too big for the drilled hole. You will warp the arm. It won't sit properly. And everyone will be able to look at that figure and see how the arm was supposed to sit on the original figure based on the chest and the back. And if it's expanding outwards in a way that does not look natural, it will be noticed. And at some point or another, somebody asks about your work. And somebody has to be very honest with them about what they see in that work. And I understand that you can say, you just don't have to buy it. I get that. And at the end of the day though, what happens when I don't buy it, you don't buy it, they don't buy it, they don't buy it? And there's all these artists that are coming out with some really phenomenal work, and they're wondering why nobody wants to buy their work, and you're trying to explain to them that, well, there's PTSD running rampant through the friggin' scene. That's why nobody wants to buy your work. They're all afraid. They're afraid when they see a paint app if it's actually been applied. They're afraid the moment it articulates if it's actually going to articulate and stay in the form. They're afraid when it's in a backer or blister if it's going to fall apart if they touch it, and if that's actually a barrier to keep them from touching it. I don't not explain that the relationship that you form with your customers can go a very long way. If you're honest with them, if you show them clear pictures, if you actually form a relationship with them and actually make them feel like they're actually valued and that you actually care about their concerns, then it makes a big difference. But most of you will say you would love to hear if there was a flaw in your toy. But if I ask most of you if you've come and approached an artist when you've seen a flaw in a toy, you haven't. And the issue then is that if you've never spoken up to that artist about the flaw in the toy, and Crumbs, the old toxic villain, decides to bring anything up, then that artist says, well, nobody else has ever said anything. I'm tired of boxes of toys sitting in closets that people are ashamed of talking about. I'm sick and tired of people feeling like, why try? Why bother trying if I can just do this? At the end of the day, we could all have really fucking cool toys, and we could all be seeing each other do really fucking cool shit. What I don't want to see is all of a sudden somebody say, there's no place for Dadaism anymore. And there's no place for fucking, I don't even know, my brain can't work right now. But I'm happy that there's different styles. I'm happy that Epic Center Workshop even said the one day, dude, bubbles are punk rock. I'm happy that shit exists. And if we were to put this in some kind of chart and try and rank it though, and I'm actually asked, well, how many bubbles did the piece have? How much flashing did the piece have? How far from original intent did it go? If I'm checking off all like -3s, you know, you've got the no bubbles, like couple bubbles, some bubbles, bubbly, crater face. I can't lie if I go down that fucking chart. That's all. And I think at the end of the day, be honest about what you're selling, and that's okay. If you have no shame in what you're putting out there, and you have no shame in your efforts and what you've made, then there should be no shame in photographing it said way and being honest with your consumers that way. That's just the reality. And like, I guarantee I'm gonna lose a fuck ton of followers today, and I'm sorry if I've offended somebody. I don't know how to be nicer about it, because I'm still here, and I'm still buying, and I'm still putting hours into videos, and I'm still following you guys, and I'm still liking your shit, and I'm still fucking engaging, because I dig it. So I don't know how to express to you that it's not as though Happy Old Crumbs is actually a faker or something like that. It's like, no, Happy Old Crumbs actually loves the scene so fucking much, he doesn't want to see it boil away. And the issue is that we're currently seeing some people who are very angry, and they're okay with publicly shitting on the underdogs. And the only reason that has happened is because somewhere along the way, we've all been too afraid to just be honest about what it is that we kind of expect for our dollar. So I hope everybody's having a great week, and I appreciate you for listening to me babble on so long.